I'm Ella, knee-deep in the world of fashion and celebs, juggling brushes and eyeshadow palettes like a pro. My life's a whirlwind of glitz, but underneath the foundation and the flash, I'm just a girl who stumbled into love when I least expected it. It was one of those rare nights off. I almost skipped the bash at Jenna's, thinking about crashing on my couch with some takeout. But fate had other plans. That's where I met Daniel. He was no movie star, but man, did he have that charm. First thing he said to me? "Wow, do they serve drinks here, or do I gotta flirt with you to get one?" I laughed, despite myself. Try flirting, see where it gets you. And flirt we did, the whole night. Between the laughs and the banter, I felt like I'd known him forever. He wasn't in the biz, worked some tech job, but that night, none of it mattered. Fast forward through a whirlwind romance, and bam, we're hitched. The wedding was something out of a movie, thanks to my connections and his charm. Then came the house, a gift from my folks. "It's too much," I told them. "Nothing's too much for our little girl," my dad said, his arm around Mom, both of them beaming. Daniel was over the moon about the place. "Babe, this house, it's unreal. Look at that garden. And the terrace? Can't wait to chill there with a beer at sunset." The first few months flew by in a blur of happiness. Mornings on the terrace, evenings tangled up on the couch, it was like living in a dream. "I could get used to this," Daniel whispered one night, kissing my forehead. "Better not get too used to it. Remember, we gotta pay the bills too," I joked, nudging him playfully. "With you, babe, I'd live in a cardboard box. But this," he gestured around at our lavish living room, "this is a nice bonus." Our conversations were simple, filled with plans for the weekend, teasing each other, or deciding what masterpiece we'd attempt to cook up for dinner. "You know, I could get used to your terrible cooking," Daniel would say, dodging the dish towel I threw at him. "Terrible? You were begging for seconds last night," I'd retort, trying to keep a straight face. It was real, it was us. No pretense, no filters. Just Ella and Daniel against the world. Or so I thought. Life was rolling smooth until it wasn't. Daniel started missing dinners, his side of the bed cold when I'd crash late at night. "Work's a beast, babe," he'd text, the same excuse on repeat. One evening, I waited up, the clock ticking past midnight. The door creaked open, and there he was, looking like a mess. "Work again?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. "Yeah, you know how it is," he mumbled, avoiding my gaze. "No, I don't, Daniel. My friends get off work at decent hours. What's so special about yours?" He shrugged, a tired smile not reaching his eyes. "Just projects, babe. Big ones." I let it slide, not wanting to start a fight. But the seed of doubt? It was planted, watered by whispers and late nights. Then came the bomb. Jenna, always the gossip queen, cornered me at the gym. "Ella, girl, you didn't hear it from me, but Daniel's been cozying up to someone." I laughed it off. "Yeah, right. Daniel? He can't even flirt without tripping over his words." "Suit yourself. Just saying, eyes open." The words gnawed at me, festering into a confrontation one night. "So, who's she?" I spat, my patience worn thin. Daniel looked like I'd slapped him. "Who's who? What the hell, Ella? Don't play dumb. You're screwing around, aren't you?" His face turned red, anger and something else, guilt, flashing in his eyes. "I'm busting my ass at work for us, and this is what I get. Accusations? We both know you're lying. Just admit it." He slammed his fist on the table, making me jump. "Fine. You want the truth? I've been working late. No affair, no mystery woman. Just work." I wanted to believe him, God, I did. But the lies were there, hidden behind late returns and missed calls. We yelled, threw accusations like grenades, our love caught in the crossfire. "Maybe we rushed into this," I shouted, tears blurring my vision. "Maybe we did," he shot back, his voice cold. Silence hung between us, heavy and suffocating. Thoughts of divorce danced in my head, a bitter end to a sweet start. But love, it's a stubborn thing. We sought help, clutching at straws, desperate to save what was left. A family psychologist, Dr. Lisa, became our referee, calling out fouls and starting plays. "Why are you two here?" she asked, notepad ready. "We're fighting. A lot," I started, my voice small. Daniel chimed in. "I work late, and she thinks I'm having an affair." Dr. Lisa looked between us. "Is that all?" We nodded, the room heavy with unsaid words. "Okay, let's unpack this. Ella, why do you feel he's cheating?" "Because he's never home. And when he is, it's like he's not really here." "And Daniel, your side?" "I'm trying to provide for us." But she doesn't see that. She only sees what she wants. The sessions were tough, each word a step through a minefield. But slowly, we started finding our way back to each other, learning to trust, to talk. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. "Think we can make it?" I asked one night, our hands tentatively linked. Daniel squeezed my hand. "Yeah, babe. We're gonna make it." We were battered, maybe a little broken, but together. And at that moment, it felt like enough. After all the turmoil and heartache, I started believing that maybe, just maybe, a baby could bridge the gap between Daniel and me. It was a desperate thought, but hope has a way of blooming in desperate soil. However, getting pregnant turned out to be a journey of its own. Turns out, I had some issues on my end, a kind of cruel irony, given our situation. It took 6 long, grueling years of trying, hoping, and countless doctor's visits before I finally saw those 2 pink lines. I was over the moon, filled with a happiness so intense it was almost terrifying. This baby, our baby, was a symbol of hope, a testament to perseverance. I couldn't wait to tell Daniel, imagining his joy mirroring mine. But when I shared the news, his reaction was like a splash of cold water on my face. "Oh, that's great," he said, his voice flat, his smile forced. It was as if I'd told him the weather forecast, not that we were going to be parents. I couldn't hide my disappointment. "Great? You don't seem excited," I accused, feeling my own excitement dim. Daniel sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I am, Ella. It's just a lot to take in, you know? I mean, a kid? We're going to be parents?" "Yeah, I know. It's scary, but it's also amazing, isn't it?" I tried to find the enthusiasm in his eyes, but found none. He nodded, forcing a smile. "Yeah, amazing." The conversation felt like hitting a brick wall. I'd imagined this moment differently in my head. Dreamed of it, even. But reality has a funny way of knocking you down a peg or two. Despite the awkward start, I clung to the hope that a baby would bring us even closer, seal the cracks that had formed in our marriage. "We need to think about the future, Daniel. For our baby," I said, hoping to ignite some spark of excitement in him. He agreed, though his enthusiasm felt as forced as his smile. "Of course. We'll figure it out. We always do." As the weeks passed, my belly grew, but the distance between us remained. Daniel tried, I could see that. He'd come home earlier, ask about my appointments, and even painted the nursery without complaint. But something was off. It was like he was going through the motions, doing what he thought was expected of him, not what he wanted. And then our miracle was born, and I was not up to it. Life with a newborn should have been about diaper changes, midnight feedings, and those quiet moments of wonder watching your baby sleep. Instead, it felt like I was living with a ghost. The whole cycle started again, like a bad rerun of a show you hated but couldn't stop watching. Daniel turned back into the man I feared would reappear. His promises to change, to be present, felt like empty words, vanishing into thin air the moment they were spoken. Late nights at work became his new norm, each excuse more elaborate than the last. First, once a week, then almost every day. "Work's crazy, babe. You know how it is," he'd say, his voice a rehearsed tape I'd played too many times in my head. One night, as I rocked our son to sleep, I heard the front door creak open. It was late, way past when normal people finish work. I waited for Daniel to come upstairs, to sneak a peek at his sleeping son or even attempt a whispered apology for missing yet another bedtime. But there was nothing. Just the soft snuffle of our baby and the distant sound of the TV flicking on downstairs. I couldn't stand it. Wrapping our son a little tighter in his blanket, I made my way downstairs, ready for a confrontation. I found Daniel sprawled on the couch, eyes glued to some late-night show. "Really, Daniel? Another late night? This is becoming a habit," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, not wanting to wake the baby. He glanced at me, irritation flickering across his face. "What do you want me to say, Ella? That I'm out partying? I'm working, for God's sake." "Working? Or avoiding us?" The words spilled out, bitter and sharp. Daniel stood up, his expression hard. "You think I don't want to be here? With my son?" There was a challenge in his voice, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I don't know what to think anymore, Daniel. You're never here. And when you are, you're not really with us." My voice broke, a mix of anger and desperation. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I'm trying, Ella. You think I don't know I'm screwing up? But what do you want from me?" "I want you to be a father, to be present. Not just a guest in your own home." I was shouting now, the frustration of the past weeks, months, boiling over. Daniel looked away, the fight going out of him. "I'm sorry. I'll try harder, I promise." Promises. We'd had plenty of those. Yet, as I looked into his face, searching for something, anything, to cling to, I realized I wanted to believe him. For our son, for us, I had to believe him. "Okay," I whispered, more to myself than to him. "But we can't keep going like this. We need to make some changes." 2 more months have passed, and Daniel's work has not gone away. His promises to change, to be present, felt like empty words, vanishing into thin air the moment they were spoken. Late nights at work became his new norm, each excuse more elaborate than the last. One night, I couldn't stand the silence, the doubt eating away at me. I confronted him, my voice laced with a tiredness that went beyond sleepless nights with a newborn. "Are you seeing someone else, Daniel?" His reaction was swift, a mix of anger and indignation that felt too rehearsed. "What? No. How can you even say that? I'm working my ass off for this family." His denial was strong, his gaze steady, but so was the pit in my stomach, growing with every word he said. I wanted to believe him, to wipe the slate clean and start fresh, but history and intuition screamed a warning I couldn't ignore. I nodded, a brittle smile plastered on my face. "Okay, I believe you." The words tasted like ash. I was lying to him, to myself. Pretending to trust when every fiber of my being screamed that I was being played for a fool, again. The day everything came crashing down started like any other, except for a message that popped up on my social media. A message from a woman I didn't know, claiming she was Daniel's lover. My first reaction was disbelief, a cold laugh escaping me as I thought, this has to be some sick joke. But curiosity, that gnawing worm, drove me to her profile, and that's when the floor fell out from under me. Pictures of her and Daniel, looking cozy and way too familiar, smiles that I hadn't seen directed at me in months. And the kids, 3 little faces that bore an unsettling resemblance to the man I called my husband. My heart wasn't just broken, it was obliterated. I didn't confront him over the phone or blast him with angry texts. No, I waited. I waited with a storm brewing inside me, the photos burning a hole through my phone. When he walked through the door that night, the air was thick with my rage, a silent tension that made him pause. "Ella? What's wrong?" Daniel asked, already on edge as he saw the look on my face. Without a word, I slid my phone across the table to him, the photos displayed like evidence at a crime scene. His face went white, his eyes flicking between the screen and me, searching for an explanation where there was none. "These? Ella, I can explain," he started, the words choking in his throat as he tried to piece together a defense out of lies. Explain? Explain what, Daniel? How you have another family? How you lied to us every day? My voice was sharp, a blade honed by betrayal. He attempted to touch the phone, perhaps to delete the evidence or simply out of a reflex to hide his guilt. It's not like that. It's complicated. Complicated? I laughed, a sound devoid of any humor. I think it's pretty simple. You cheated. You lied. You led a double life at the expense of our family. What's complicated about that? Daniel's face was a mask of desperation, the reality of his choices finally hitting him. Ella, please. I made a mistake. I can fix this. Fix this? How, Daniel? By pretending those kids don't exist? By erasing what you did? The absurdity of it all fueled my anger. I don't know. But I want to make things right. His voice was barely a whisper, a plea for a mercy he didn't deserve. Right? There's no right here, Daniel. Only wrong. And you chose that path, not me. My voice was steady now, the decision clear in my heart. He opened his mouth to say something else, maybe another excuse or a promise he couldn't keep, but I was done. I want you out, Daniel. Out of this house. Out of our lives. The resignation in his eyes told me he knew it was over. He packed a bag, his movements slow, like he was still processing the end of everything we had. As he stood at the door, a pathetic figure clutching a duffel bag of lies, he looked back at me. Ella, just go. My interruption was final, the closing of a book I never wanted to read again. And with that, he left, the silence of the house a heavy blanket around me. It was over, the end of a chapter one never saw coming. But in that moment, I knew it was just the beginning of something else for me. A few days later, there was a pounding at the door, so fierce it made me jump. I barely had time to react before she barged in, the woman from the photos, with Daniel cowering behind her like a child caught stealing candy. She wasted no time, strutting through my home like she owned the place, eyeing every room with a calculating gaze. Daniel wouldn't meet my eye, his shame a tangible thing that filled the room even more than his mistress's arrogance. Finally, she turned to me, her eyes cold. You need to leave. Take your kid and go. A tiny apartment should be enough for the two of you. I stared at her, disbelief and anger warring inside me. Excuse me? She crossed her arms, smirking. You heard me. I have 3 kids with him. We need this house more than you do. I glanced at Daniel, expecting him to say something, anything. But he remained silent, a spectator in his own life's destruction. And you'll be leaving by next week, she added, as if announcing a change in the weather, not uprooting my entire life. As they left, Daniel not daring to say a word, the absurdity and audacity of the situation sank in. The woman who helped break my marriage now wanted to take my home, too. It was surreal, like a bad dream I couldn't wake up from. A week had dragged by, and as promised, the doorbell rang with an urgency that only someone deluded enough to think they owned the place would have. Opening the door, I found them, the unlikely duo, Daniel's mistress, oozing false confidence, and Daniel, looking like a man who'd lost at his own game. You're still here? The mistress spat out, her eyes darting around, taking in the unchanged scene within. Why wouldn't I be? It's my house. I shot back, leaning against the doorway, finding strength in my stance. Her eyes flickered to Daniel, seeking some kind of affirmation. He, with a shrug that carried the weight of his lies, managed to mumble. We bought this house together after the wedding. It's as much mine as it is yours. I couldn't help but laugh. It was either that or scream. Bought? My parents gifted this house to me. Your name's nowhere on it. It's mine, always has been. The shock on his face was almost comical. The mistress, too, looked as if I'd slapped her with the truth. But, the house? No buts. It's mine. And him. I gestured towards Daniel with a disdainful flick of my wrist. Thinking he could lay claim to it is laughable. She tried a different tactic then, her pride bruised, but not beaten. Well, you may have the house, but I have him. A rich man with a hefty salary. I burst out laughing. The absurdity of the situation demanded it. Rich? Hefty salary? He's been playing you. He's a clerk, always has been. There's no wealth there. She turned to Daniel, her face a mask of disbelief and anger. Is this true? Daniel, the color draining from his face, nodded, his earlier bravado evaporating into thin air. I might have exaggerated a bit about my job. A bit? The fury in her voice was a clear warning signal. She turned her wrath towards me, as if I were the one who'd lied to her. Without another word, she stormed off, Daniel trailing behind her like a lost puppy, his shoulders slumped in defeat. 2 weeks after I kicked Daniel out and stood my ground against his mistress's absurd claim to my house, I took the next logical step. I filed for divorce. It was time to officially sever the ties that bound me to a man who'd become a stranger, a source of betrayal and pain. I wanted freedom, a clean slate for me and my son. Just when I thought I could catch a breath, she was back on my doorstep, the mistress, her desperation palpable, 3 kids in tow looking every bit as miserable as she was. Please, she started, her eyes brimming with tears. You have to help us. We have nowhere to go. This house, it's all they have. I stared at her, incredulous. Was she serious? After everything, she had the gall to show up here, demanding my home? The audacity, I muttered under my breath. Listen, and listen good. This house is mine. You and Daniel made your bed. Now, lie in it. Somewhere else. Her tears quickly evaporated, replaced by a scorching anger. How can you be so heartless? Look at them. She pushed the kids forward, their tears starting on cue. I sighed, my heart heavy for the kids, but my resolve steel. This isn't my doing. It's yours. It's his. You need to leave. Now. When she didn't budge, just stood there screaming accusations and curses, I had no choice. I called the police. The situation was beyond ridiculous, beyond sad. It was a circus, and I was done being a spectator. The officers arrived swiftly, their presence a relief. They tried to reason with her, but she was beyond reason, her tirade against me escalating. Eventually, they escorted her and the children away. The sight of them being led from my doorstep was both a relief and a pang in my heart. Those kids deserved better. Just when I thought I had started to turn the page, Daniel showed up again, knocking on my door with a look that was half regret, half desperation. I opened the door, not surprised but disappointed to see him standing there, a bag in his hand, his eyes pleading. Ella, I messed up. I know that. But I've left her, left all that behind. I want to come back, for you, for our son. Can you forgive me? His voice was shaky, his usual confidence nowhere to be seen. I stared at him, disbelief and anger swirling inside me. After everything, he thought he could just waltz back in? Forgive you? My voice was low, laced with venom. After you lied, cheated, and broke our family? You think you can just drop them and everything's fine? He shifted uncomfortably, his eyes not meeting mine. I know I don't deserve it, but I want to make things right. Make things right? I laughed, harsh and cold. You're beyond making things right, Daniel. You made your choice. Now, live with it. His face fell, and for a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Ella, please. No. It's too late for pleases and sorries. You need to leave. Now. My voice was firm, brooking no argument. He looked at me, the realization finally dawning on him that there was no going back, no forgiveness to be had. With a heavy sigh, he turned and walked away, his shoulders slumped in defeat. As he disappeared from view, a part of me felt lighter. It was finally over. I was free from the web of lies and betrayal Daniel had spun around us. In the weeks that followed, I heard through the grapevine that Daniel and his mistress were crammed into a small apartment, their lives a constant battle, a far cry from the illusions he'd tried to sell to both of us. It was a fitting end, I thought, to a tale of deceit. As for me, I focused on my son, on rebuilding our lives without the shadow of Daniel hanging over us. We were moving on, stepping into a future that was uncertain, but ours to shape. The road ahead was long, but for the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful. We had survived the storm, and now, it was time to enjoy the calm.
All right, everyone's presentations are done. Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me and began to speak. There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. I'm leaving. After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick? Is something wrong? Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my 2nd year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, I'm thirsty. Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children. With zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job. Having joined the company wanting to do customer service. I don't care what they say, I plan to quit anytime, he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance. As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them. It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. All right, everyone's presentations are done. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me. There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. Still here? Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. I'm leaving. I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! What's wrong? Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself, had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, I'm very sorry. Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, get his boss here immediately. It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. What is that idiot doing? All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next. Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you. I immediately followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was, as the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize. Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. What kind of training are you giving your subordinates? Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed. I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their inn. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry. Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong. Mike! What have you done? Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. I didn't do anything wrong. You're still saying that? Look at him. Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract? Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go. Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him. There's no way he was pushed aside. Don't make things worse here. He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he? I don't remember that part. I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.